Buckle up, everybody. We're diving deep today into a world that's, well, a little unsettling, to be honest, but totally fascinating at the same time. We're talking biological threats. And not just the theoretical kind, the kind that makes headlines and keeps you up at night. We're going to look at how these threats connect to leadership, survival, and some pretty heavy historical baggage. You know, the kind of stuff that makes you rethink everything you thought you knew.
You hit the nail on the head there. It's amazing how often we forget about the history behind these threats. We tend to focus on what's happening right now, the immediate dangers, but you can't really understand the present without knowing the past, right?
Totally agree. And you know I love a good story. So let's talk about this 1977 Russian flu thing, for example. It sounds like something straight out of a Sky movie. A lab accident in the Soviet Union, and bam, the whole world's facing a pandemic. Is that for real?
It is, unfortunately. It's a classic case of scientific progress kind of going off the rails. They were working on a flu vaccine, which is a noble goal, of course, but they were using a live virus, and it seems their safety measures weren't exactly top-notch.
So that's how it turned into a global pandemic.
Pretty much, yeah. This particular flu strain hadn't been around for decades, so most people had no immunity. It spread like wildfire, causing a lot of sickness and death. It took a massive global effort to finally get it under control. A stark reminder, don't you think, of how vulnerable we are to these kinds of threats.
No doubt about it. It makes you wonder, though, did anything like this happen before? I mean, before 1977?
Oh, absolutely. Biological warfare has been around for centuries. Way back in ancient times, armies were already using disease as a weapon.
Seriously? I had no idea. What did that even look like back then?
Well, they didn't really understand how diseases spread, so it was a lot of trial and error. Imagine things like, catapulting infected corpses over city walls, or poisoning wells and water supplies. Pretty gruesome stuff.
Wow, that's both ingenious and horrifying. I guess no matter what time period we're talking about, people always find ways to, let's say, weaponize nature for their own less than noble purposes.
You got it. And don't forget the psychological impact of those tactics. Imagine the terror being trapped in a city under siege, knowing a plague could wipe you out at any moment.
Yeah, talk about demoralizing. So, how do things progress from those early, kind of crude methods?
As our understanding of biology grew, so did the potential for weaponizing it. Fast forward to the 20th century, and nations are running full-blown biological weapons programs. They could produce huge amounts of deadly pathogens.
Like anthrax, plague, that level of serious stuff.
Exactly. And even more exotic agents you might not have heard of. One of the most infamous examples is Unit 731, a Japanese unit during World War II. They did some truly horrifying experiments on prisoners of war. A really dark chapter.
Yeah, I've read about Unit 731. It's hard to fathom that level of cruelty. So, after World War II, where did things go from there?
Well, the Cold War brought this whole new level of fear, nuclear annihilation. But alongside that very public arms race, there was another one happening in the shadows. A biological arms race, just as terrifying.
So both the US and the Soviet Union were developing bioweapons.
Yep. Both sides were stockpiling massive amounts of deadly agents, enough to wipe out entire populations. The Soviet Union's program, called biopreparat, was particularly massive. Thousands of scientists working on all sorts of terrifying weapons.
It's mind-blowing. All this happening in secret while everyone else just went about their lives.
Yeah.
What happened to those programs after the Cold War ended?
Well, the Biological Weapons Convention in 1972 was a big step towards disarming. It banned developing, producing, and stockpiling these weapons. But enforcing a treaty like that, it's incredibly difficult.
Because it's tough to know what's happening behind closed doors.
You got it. And there have been accusations that some countries, like Russia and North Korea, might have continued their programs in secret.
Not very reassuring. So even with the treaty, the threat's still out there.
Unfortunately, yes. And in some ways, it's even more complicated now than during the Cold War.
How so?
For one thing, biotechnology has advanced so rapidly, it's easier and cheaper than ever to develop these weapons. Technologies like CRISPR, which can edit genes, they have incredible potential for good, for curing diseases, but they could also be used to create, designer pathogens that are resistant to our current drugs and vaccines.
So now we're not just worried about natural diseases, but engineered ones too. That's a whole new level of scary.
It is. And then you have the rise of non-state actors, terrorist groups. During the Cold War, the threat was mainly from nation-states, but now these groups could potentially get their hands on the tech and expertise to develop and use bioweapons.
So we've got rogue states, terrorists, and superbugs. That's a lot to wrap your head around. Let's shift gears for a minute, though, and talk about the human side of things. How do these threats affect us psychologically? I mean, beyond the obvious fear factor.
That's a critical aspect, and it's often overlooked. The psychological impact can be just as devastating as the physical effects. The fear of the unknown, the loss of control, the social disruption. All of that can lead to anxiety, depression, even PTSD.
We saw that play out during the COVID-19 pandemic, didn't we? The constant news, the isolation, all the uncertainty. It took a toll on a lot of people's mental health.
It did. And in a future where bioweapons could be even deadlier and more unpredictable, the psychological effects could be even more severe.
So, what can we do about it? How can we prepare ourselves mentally and emotionally for these kinds of threats?
Staying informed is key, but be careful about your sources. Stick to reputable news outlets and scientific organizations. Don't get sucked into the misinformation vortex that tends to pop up around these events.
Good point. It's easy to get overwhelmed with all the information out there, especially online.
Yeah, it is. Another important thing is to build strong social connections. When things go bad, those connections with family, friends, and your community, they're essential for support and resilience.
It makes sense. Having people you can rely on can make all the difference in a crisis.
Absolutely. And it's not just about emotional support. Strong communities are more effective at responding to emergencies, sharing resources, taking care of those in need.
So building community is a form of preparedness in itself.
It really is.
Yeah.
Just as important as having a well-stocked emergency kit.
Speaking of which, what about practical preparedness? What are some things people can do to be ready for a biological threat?
Having a plan is crucial.
A plan for what exactly?
A plan for what you do if there's a major outbreak or other biological event. Where would you go? Who would you contact? How would you get food and water if supplies were disrupted? Thinking this through ahead of time can reduce anxiety and help you make better decisions under pressure.
Like that saying, failing to plan is planning to fail. Right. Better to think about these things now, while things are calm, than try to figure it out in the middle of a crisis.
Exactly. And of course, another key part of being prepared is having a well-stocked emergency kit.
What kind of things should be in it?
You'll want at least a 2-week supply of food and water per person. Don't forget essential medications, first aid supplies, sanitation items, and protective gear like masks and gloves.
So it's similar to prepping for a natural disaster, but with some extras specific to biological threats.
Good way to think about it.
Okay, so we've got staying informed, building strong communities, having a plan, and an emergency kit. What else?
Learning some basic survival skills can be really valuable. Things like knowing how to purify water, start a fire, provide basic first aid.
A lot of people don't really have those skills these days, though.
That's true, but there are tons of resources available to learn. Books, websites, courses, you name it.
Like a modern-day version of those old Boy Scout manuals. Except the stakes are a bit higher now.
Exactly.
This has been a fascinating conversation, and honestly a little sobering too. But I think it's crucial to have these conversations, to be aware of the threats and prepare ourselves.
I agree. The more we understand about these threats, the better equipped we'll be to face them.
Well, we've only scratched the surface here. We'll be back in the next part of this deep dive to dig even deeper into the world of biological threats, leadership, and survival.
And we'll explore some of the ethical quandaries that come up. When science and technology intersect with human nature, it's going to be a fascinating journey. You know, the COVID-19 pandemic really showed us just how much these threats can mess with our heads, even when they're not, intentionally weaponized.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We all felt it, the fear, the uncertainty, the isolation. For some people, it really went deep and stuck around long after the worst was over.
Exactly. It's not just about getting through the initial crisis. It's about surviving the aftermath, too. The psychological fallout. We're talking about anxiety, depression, PTSD, even substance abuse. These effects can linger for a long time.
Because it's not just surviving the event itself, it's surviving the mental and emotional toll that comes with it.
Precisely. And that's where things get even more complicated, because this psychological impact is often intertwined with social and cultural factors.
What do you mean by that?
Well, think about how we react to fear, how we deal with stress, how we assess risk. These are all influenced by our upbringing, our culture, our social circles. There's no one-size-fits-all response.
So different people will react differently to the same threat. That makes sense.
Absolutely. And those differences can have a huge impact on how communities respond to crises. For example, if people don't trust the authorities or if they're getting their information from shady sources, it can be really hard to implement effective public health measures.
Oh yeah, we saw that in real time during the pandemic. All the misinformation and conspiracy theories spreading online. It's like fighting a virus on two fronts.
Exactly. And it's not just about individual beliefs. These things can spread through social networks really quickly, creating this kind of collective anxiety that's tough to deal with. It almost becomes a virus itself, a virus of fear and misinformation.
That's a powerful analogy. And like a real virus, it can mutate and spread, making it even harder to contain. So we've established that the psychological impact is real, it's complicated, and it can last a long time. What can we actually do about it? How can we build up resilience both individually and as communities?
First things first, we have to acknowledge the problem. These psychological effects are real, and we can't just ignore them. It's not about being tough and pretending everything's fine.
Right, pretending won't make it go away.
Exactly. We need to create a culture where it's okay to talk about these things, to seek help when you need it, and to support others who are struggling.
That's so important. There's still a lot of stigma around mental health, especially for men.
There is, and it needs to change. We need to create spaces where men feel comfortable opening up about their fears and anxieties, without feeling judged or weak.
Absolutely. Besides talking about it, what else can we do?
There are a lot of things that can help build resilience. Things like exercise, mindfulness, spending time in nature, connecting with loved ones. It's about taking care of yourself, both physically and mentally.
So self-care is important, but it's not just about individual effort, right? You mentioned community earlier.
You're right. Building strong communities is another crucial piece of the puzzle. When people feel connected to something bigger than themselves, they tend to be more resilient in the face of adversity. It's not just about individual preparedness, it's about collective preparedness as well.
And that brings us to another critical aspect, leadership. When things hit the fan, strong leadership is essential.
Absolutely. But what does strong leadership actually mean in this context? It's more than just being in charge. It's about being effective. It's about leaders who can communicate clearly and honestly, inspire trust and confidence, make tough decisions when they need to be made.
So it's about competence, but also about character and integrity.
Exactly. And it's not just about government leaders either. We need strong leadership at all levels in our families, our communities, and our workplaces. Everyone has a role to play. And that's why it's so important to talk about these issues, to educate ourselves and others, and be ready to step up when needed.
Let's talk about some real-world examples of leadership in the face of these kinds of threats. We talked about the 1977 Russian flu, Unit 731, the Cold War arms race earlier. But there must be other examples, maybe some more inspiring ones.
There are, and I think it's important to highlight those. Because they show us what's possible, we can learn from both the successes and the failures of the past.
Okay, let's start with something recent. The COVID-19 pandemic was a global crisis, and leadership varied widely. Were there any leaders who really stood out, either for doing things well or, well, not so well?
There were definitely some notable examples. Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, got a lot of praise for her quick and decisive action. She implemented lockdowns and other measures early on, which helped contain the virus effectively.
I remember her communication style being really well received too.
It was. She was clear, compassionate, and consistent in her messaging. She really seemed to connect with people on a human level.
On the flip side, leaders like Boris Johnson in the UK and Donald Trump in the US faced a lot of criticism for their handling of the pandemic.
They did. Their messaging was often inconsistent and confusing, and there was a sense that political considerations were sometimes put ahead of public health.
It seemed like they were downplaying the threat at first, and then they had to scramble to catch up when things got bad.
That's a pattern we see a lot, unfortunately, and it highlights how important it is to have leaders who are willing to listen to experts, to be proactive rather than reactive, and to communicate effectively with the public.
I think the pandemic also showed us how important trust is.
Absolutely. When people trust their leaders, they're more likely to follow their guidance, even when it's tough or inconvenient. But when that trust is broken, it can be really hard to rebuild.
And that trust is built on things like transparency, honesty, and accountability.
Exactly. And it's also built on competence. Leaders who show they know what they're doing and have a plan are much more likely to inspire confidence.
So we've talked about leadership in a pandemic. But what about other types of biological threats? What kind of leadership do we need to be ready for things like bioterrorism or engineered pathogens?
That's a great question, and I think it points to the need for a different kind of leadership.
What do you mean?
The skills you need to manage a pandemic, which is a natural event, even if human actions can make it worse. Those skills are different from what you need to manage a bioterrorist attack, which is a deliberate act of aggression. It requires a different mindset, a different set of skills, a different approach to decision making.
So what does that leadership look like when we're facing something like a bioterrorist attack?
We need leaders who can think strategically, leaders who understand the complexities of the threat, and who are prepared to take decisive action, all while being mindful of the potential consequences of their actions. The stakes are incredibly high in these situations.
So it's not just about stopping the attack, it's about managing the aftermath effectively and ethically.
Precisely. We need leaders who are thoughtful, compassionate, and have a strong moral compass. It's a rare combination of traits, but they do exist. We need to do everything we can to identify these individuals, support them, and prepare them for the challenges ahead.
Okay, we've talked about the need for strong leadership, but leadership doesn't operate in a vacuum. It's influenced by a whole bunch of factors, including culture, politics, and social norms.
You're absolutely right. And those factors can have a huge impact on how leaders make decisions, how they communicate with the public, and ultimately how effective they are.
So let's break down some of those factors. Let's start with culture. How does culture shape our understanding of biological threats and our responses to them?
Culture influences so much, from how we perceive risk to our attitudes toward authority to our beliefs about health and disease. It shapes our entire worldview.
Can you give us some examples of how that might play out in real life?
Sure, think about it. In some cultures, there's a strong emphasis on individual freedom and self-reliance, while in others, the focus is more on collective responsibility and community well-being.
And those different values would definitely influence how people respond to public health measures, like mask mandates or lockdowns.
Exactly. And they can also shape how leaders communicate with the public. In a culture that values individualism, leaders might be more likely to emphasize personal choice and responsibility. In a culture that values collectivism, the message might focus more on shared sacrifice for the common good.
That makes a lot of sense. So these cultural differences can make it tough to find a one-size-fits-all approach to public health.
They definitely can. That's why it's so important to have leaders who are culturally sensitive, leaders who understand the nuances of their communities and can tailor their messages accordingly.
All right, we've talked about culture. What about politics? How does politics influence our response to biological threats?
Well, at its heart, politics is often about power. And in times of crisis, those power dynamics can become even more intense. Leaders are under immense pressure to act, and their decisions can have life or death consequences.
Especially in a highly polarized political environment, those decisions can become even more challenging as leaders try to balance competing interests and agendas.
Exactly. We saw this play out during the pandemic. With all the debates over mask mandates, lockdowns, and vaccine distribution, often those debates were driven by misinformation, conspiracy theories, and partisan politics, which made it even harder to implement effective public health measures.
It seems like politics can be both helpful and harmful in these situations.
It absolutely can. On one hand, political leaders have the power to mobilize resources, coordinate responses, and implement policies. That can protect public health. But on the other hand, political considerations can lead to delays, missteps, and even outright denial of the threat.
It's a tough line to walk.
And it really is. And it requires leaders who can put aside partisan politics and prioritize the common good, which is easier said than done sometimes.
Okay, we've covered culture and politics. What about social norms? How do they shape our understanding of biological threats?
Social norms are those unwritten rules that govern how we behave in society. They influence so much, from how we greet each other, to how we express emotions, to how we perceive risk.
Can you give us some examples of how social norms might affect our response to biological threats?
In some cultures, it's taboo to talk about illness or death, which can make it really hard to have open and honest conversations about public health.
That's interesting. So even if people are aware of the threat, they might be hesitant to talk about it or to seek help if they need it.
Exactly, and that can have serious consequences for disease control and prevention.
Any other examples come to mind?
Sure, in some cultures, there's a strong emphasis on stoicism and self-reliance, which can make people reluctant to admit weakness or ask for help.
So even if they're feeling sick, they might try to tough it out,
Yeah.
which could make things worse for them and potentially spread the illness to others.
Exactly. Social norms can be a double-edged sword. On one hand, they can promote social cohesion and cooperation, which are essential for responding to crises, but on the other hand, they can also create barriers to communication and help-seeking, which can really undermine public health efforts.
Okay, so we've talked about how culture, politics, and social norms can all play a role in our response to these threats. Are there any other factors we should consider?
There are many, but one that's becoming increasingly important is technology.
Technology. How does that fit into the picture?
Well, technology is both a blessing and a curse when it comes to biological threats. On the one hand, it gives us tools to detect, track, and respond to outbreaks more effectively than ever before. Think about things like sophisticated surveillance systems, rapid diagnostic tests, even artificial intelligence. These tools can be incredibly valuable in slowing down the spread of disease and saving lives.
Well, you said technology is also a curse. How so?
The same technologies that can be used for good can also be used for harmful purposes. For example, advancements in biotechnology have made it easier than ever to engineer pathogens, potentially creating new and deadlier bioweapons.
So it's a double-edged sword. The same technology that could cure diseases could also be used to create them.
That's the dilemma we face with scientific progress. And it's not just biotechnology. The internet and social media have created new challenges too, haven't they? The rapid spread of misinformation and conspiracy theories online can undermine public health efforts and create a climate of fear and distrust.
So technology is a powerful tool, but it can be used for good or for bad.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to be thoughtful about how we develop and use technology and to make sure we're using it to protect public health, not to harm it.
We've covered some heavy stuff today.
Biological threats.
Psychological impacts, leadership, culture, politics, technology. It's a lot to digest.
It is, but I think it's important to have these conversations, to be aware of the challenges and to start thinking about solutions.
You know what they say, knowledge is power.
It is. And in a world where biological threats are becoming increasingly complex and unpredictable, knowledge is our best defense.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground in this part of our deep dive. We've explored the psychological impact of biological threats, the challenges of leadership in times of crisis, and the intricate interplay of culture, politics, and technology.
We've seen how these factors can shape our perceptions of risk, influence our behaviors, and ultimately determine our ability to respond effectively to these threats.
But it's not all doom and gloom, is it? We've also seen examples of courage, resilience, and innovation in the face of these challenges.
We have, and those examples give us hope for the future. They show us that even when things are tough, humans are capable of extraordinary things.
They really do. They remind us of our capacity for adaptation, our ability to learn from our mistakes, and our determination to protect ourselves and the people we care about.
Exactly. And that's what we need to focus on, our ability to adapt, learn, and protect.
Well said. We'll be back in the next part of this deep dive to explore the ethical dimensions of biodefense and discuss what the future might hold for humanity in an age of biological warfare. Okay, we're back for the final part of our deep dive on biological threats. We've talked about a lot already, from historical examples to the psychological impacts, leadership challenges, and all those factors at play, like culture and technology. Now let's shift gears a bit and talk about the ethical side of things. Biodefense, it's a minefield ethically, wouldn't you say?
It really is. Biodefense raises some of the toughest ethical dilemmas we face as a species. It's where science, technology, and morality all collide, and those intersections can be, well, pretty messy.
So let's get right into those ethical dilemmas.
All right.
What are some of the biggest ones we need to be grappling with?
One of the most significant is something called the dual-use dilemma.
Dual use, what does that even mean?
It means that the same knowledge and technologies that can be used for good to improve human health can also be used to create bioweapons.
So like the same research that could lead to a cure for cancer could also be used to make a deadly virus.
That's the dilemma in a nutshell. And there's no easy solution, it's a constant balancing act.
No kidding. So how do we even begin to navigate that? How do we balance the potential benefits of science with the very real risks of misuse?
That's the million-dollar question, and there's no simple answer. But I think it starts with acknowledging that science is never truly neutral. It's always influenced by social and political forces. The questions we ask, the research we fund, the technologies we develop, these are all choices. Choices shaped by our values and beliefs.
So we need to be more aware of those values and beliefs and how they might be affecting our decisions about science and technology.
Exactly. We need to have open and honest conversations about the ethical implications of the choices we're making, both individually and as a society. If we don't, we could end up creating a more dangerous world, not a safer one.
That's a pretty sobering thought. So we've got this dual-use dilemma to deal with. What other ethical challenges are on the horizon?
Another one that's closely related is the issue of who benefits from biodefense research. It's often expensive, resource-intensive research. And the benefits, things like new vaccines, treatments, diagnostic tools, they're not always distributed fairly.
So are you saying there's a risk that the wealthy countries,
Yeah.
they might end up with all the best biodefense tech, leaving everyone else vulnerable?
It's a real concern, and it's something we need to be actively talking about. As we develop and deploy these technologies, a bioweapon doesn't care about your nationality or your income. A pandemic is a global event, and it demands a global response, a response that's fair and just.
I couldn't agree more. Okay, so we've talked about the dual use dilemma and the problem of equitable access.
Yeah.
Any other ethical challenges we should be thinking about?
Oh, there are plenty, but one that's becoming especially relevant in the age of AI is autonomy.
Autonomy. How does that relate to biodefense?
Well, as AI gets more and more sophisticated, we're seeing more and more potential for it to be used in biodefense decision making. Think about AI systems that can analyze data, identify threats, and even recommend what actions to take in response to a biological attack or outbreak.
That sounds, I don't know, promising, but also a little scary.
It is both. These systems could be incredibly useful, but they also raise some serious ethical questions. For instance, who's ultimately responsible for the decisions these systems make? If an AI system recommends something that ends up having unintended consequences, who takes the blame? The developers, the users, the government?
That's a tough one. And it gets even more complicated when you think about potential bias in AI systems.
Absolutely. AI systems are only as good as the data they're trained on. If that data is biased, the AI will be biased too. This could lead to AI systems making decisions that are discriminatory or unfair. It's a real danger we need to watch out for as we bring AI into the biodefense world.
It sounds like we're entering uncharted territory, ethically speaking.
We are, but that doesn't mean we should avoid these technologies. It means we need to approach them carefully and thoughtfully. We need to have those open and honest conversations about the potential risks and benefits. And we need to develop clear ethical guidelines for how we develop and use them.
Because ultimately, the goal of biodefense is to protect human life, right?
Exactly. And we need to make sure our efforts to achieve that goal are aligned with our values.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground on the ethical issues surrounding biodefense. Now let's look ahead. What's in store for humanity in this age of biological threats?
That's the big question, isn't it? We can't predict the future for sure, but we can make some educated guesses based on what we're seeing now, the trends and emerging technologies.
So let's speculate a bit. What are some of the things that might shape the future of biological threats and biodefense?
Well, one thing that's almost guaranteed is that technology will keep advancing at a rapid pace. We're already seeing amazing breakthroughs in fields like biotechnology, artificial intelligence, nanotechnology, and those advancements will have a huge impact on the kinds of biological threats we face.
So we're probably going to see more sophisticated bioweapons, maybe even designer pathogens that are tailored to specific targets.
It's definitely a possibility, and we need to be ready for it.
What about on the defense side? How will these technologies shape our ability to protect ourselves?
Well, the good news is that these same technologies also give us new ways to defend ourselves, new ways to detect, track, and respond to outbreaks more effectively. We're already seeing rapid diagnostic tests, wearable sensors that can monitor for signs of illness, even AI systems that can predict how diseases might spread.
So it's like an arms race, but not just between countries, but between our technology and the pathogens themselves.
That's a good way to put it, and it's a race we absolutely have to win.
What about the human element in all of this? How do you think our understanding of human psychology and behavior will play into the future of biodefense?
The human element is absolutely essential and often overlooked. We need to understand how people perceive risk, how they make decisions when under pressure, how they react to fear and uncertainty. If we don't take those things into account, even the best tech in the world won't be enough.
So it's not just about science and technology. It's about understanding people and how they behave in a crisis.
Exactly. We need to design our defenses with human behavior in mind, build trust, foster resilience, and give people the tools to make informed decisions.
So biodefense isn't just a technical challenge, it's a human one too.
It's both. And that's why it's so important to have a multidisciplinary approach, one that draws on insights from fields like psychology, sociology, anthropology, even philosophy.
This has been a fascinating and thought-provoking deep dive. We've explored the history of biological warfare, the ethical side of biodefense, the potential for future threats, and the technologies that might help us protect ourselves. It's a lot to absorb, but I feel like I've learned so much about this complex landscape.
I'm glad to hear that. It's a journey that takes us through the intersection of science, technology, and humanity, and it's a journey we all need to be a part of.
I couldn't agree more. So as we wrap up this deep dive, what's the one key takeaway you hope our listeners walk away with?
The future is not predetermined. The choices we make today will shape what tomorrow looks like. If we want a future where humanity is safe from these threats, We need to be informed, engaged, and proactive. We can't just sit around and wait for something bad to happen. We need to be thinking ahead, anticipating challenges, and coming up with solutions.
And we need to do it together, right? This isn't something any one country or organization can solve on its own.
Absolutely. It requires collaboration, cooperation, and a shared commitment to protecting our collective future.
This has been a truly insightful conversation. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into biological threats, leadership, and survival.
It's been my pleasure. And for those who want to learn more, there are some excellent books out there. You can find them on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. Just search for biological threats, biodefense, or pandemic preparedness. You'll find a wealth of information at your fingertips.
Great advice. Remember, folks, knowledge is power. Stay informed, stay vigilant, and stay safe. Until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.